Welcome to Smarticus Tells History. All right, enough with the echo and fanfare. You're here for history, right? And not that boring crap you learned in high school. This stuff's actually interesting. Like things you've never heard about the Civil War, Cleopatra, automobiles, Monopoly, the Black Plague, and more. Fascinating stories, interesting topics, and some downright weird facts from the past. It's a new twist on some stories you may know, and an interesting look at some things you may have never heard. So, grab a beer, kick back, and enjoy. Here's your host, Smarticus.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Smarticus Tells History, where we explore some of the most fascinating stories from history. I am your host, Smarticus, accompanied by my co-host, Phoenix.
Hello.
Today we'll be discussing the Avengers. No, not the ones from Marvel. I am talking about the Jewish Avengers, who were a group of Holocaust survivors that, well, took matters into their own hands and sought justice against their Nazi oppressors. But first, we have this week's food item to discuss. This week, we are doing a famous Jewish recipe called matzah ball soup.
I love matzah ball soup. You've never had it?
I've never had it. I've never even heard about it until we started doing this. And I'm going to say it up front, like I told you earlier, I did not, I totally cheated. I found a box that said matzo ball soup at the commissary. I bought it. I made it. I haven't tried it yet. But that's what I did. So, and I know that there's going to be surely there's other Jewish people, like me, they might be a little lazy. So,
well, mom's not going to make it, so you might as well go ahead and make it yourself, but you only got some time.
Right. Yeah, maybe there's a time limit involved.
Oh, man. First time I ever had this that I remember, my mother will probably correct me, but the first time I ever had it was from my aunt-in-law, my husband's aunt.
Right.
Actually works over in California. She worked with a Jewish community. I can't remember what they were doing. I bring this up now. I can't remember what they were doing, but she was working with them and got really, really close, and they were sharing recipes and stuff.
I don't want to say cliche, but maybe they're having a bar mitzvah or something. Maybe.
She also is an ASL interpreter, so she might have been working with the community for that. I don't know. But she also grew up with the Jewish heritage and food thanks to her mother's side of the family. What are you laughing for?
So, I was just thinking, because you said, she's an ASL interpreter.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just thinking, what are we? Well, we're 90s babies, or 80, late 80s, early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And ASL was always a big thing. So I was sitting here thinking, I was like, our listeners are probably going to think age, sex, location from like AOL. So that's what I just thought of. But no, she is talking about the sign language in case anybody was unaware or curious was confused. That is a sign language interpreter.
Yes, in case anyone's wondering.
They speak with sign language.
Yes, American Sign Language.
American Sign Language, yeah, that's what it stands for.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I didn't mean to, it just dawned on me. Yeah. Anyways. This is good. So I'm interrupting again, but
no, it's okay.
This tastes almost just like chicken noodle soup.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's my take on it, and it's very good.
The matzah crackers are huge. I mean, like the size of my face.
Oh, really?
And they're kind of like a crispier, thinner saltine cracker.
Okay.
But they're kosher.
So that reminds me. Okay, I don't know if they're kosher or not. That reminds me of MRE.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they'll have large, 4-inch crackers in there.
Mm-hmm.
And they are extremely dry. And it's also a competition sometimes for people to see if they can eat both crackers.
Oh my gosh,
water
no.
At one time. That's usually given to the new guy. But it made me laugh, yeah.
Trial by fire.
Yeah.
Matzo ball soup is a traditional Jewish soup that is commonly associated with Jewish cuisine. It originated in Eastern Europe, particularly among Jewish communities in Poland and Ukraine. The soup is typically made from chicken broth or vegetable broth, and it features matzo balls, which are dumplings made from a matzo meal, which is ground unleavened bread, eggs, water, and fat, such as chicken fat or olive oil, like was what I used for mine.
I used vegetable oil.
Nice. The soup is often flavored with carrots, onions, celery, which is what I happen to have in mine.
I don't have any of that, yeah.
I just chopped a bunch of stuff and threw it in.
So I had a recipe out, and I did have chicken thawed in the refrigerator, chicken legs, and I was gonna go ahead and boil them up and make the broth that way, and get the parsley and stuff out. But then I was like, oh yeah, I bought this because I found a different recipe from, I think it was a Food Network, and which is usually my go-to place for recipes. I realized it called for like half a cup of parsley, and I was like, man, that is a lot of parsley.
It is a bit.
Most recipes call for like half a tablespoon, something around there, that's half a cup. I didn't have half a cup, and I was like, well, cilantro and parsley are almost the same thing.
No,
I didn't.
Oh my God.
I thought about it. I was like, they're almost the same thing, but
I am so not a fan of cilantro. I mean, really? I can do it in small doses, but it's like getting punched in the face by a bar of refreshing soap. I don't appreciate it, and I just I'm not a fan.
I don't mind it. To me, they taste almost the exact same. That's
wild.
I mean, they're different, of course, but it's very similar.
Right.
But
I was watching Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives the other day. Like I shared with you, I texted you about it.
Yeah, you told me that. Yeah.
I use it as a binge watching thing, so I can just put it on and I can work.
Mm-hmm.
I look up and I'm like, oh look, beautiful food, and then I go back to working some more.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually went to somewhere in New York City, no surprise there.
Mm-hmm.
They were calling it the world famous matzo ball soup, and it was so funny because I got to thinking about it. It's the same kind of soup. It's so simple and so homey, but it wouldn't be surprising. It's not. Sorry, it isn't surprising to find out that you can get it anywhere in the U.S. as well as over in Ukraine or Poland. It's just kind of neat.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, that's interesting because I wouldn't have thought. Really, I mean, most foods. Okay, there's one universal food that I think, for the most part, you can find just about anywhere, and I think that's pizza. Because I think no matter where you go, there's always pizza.
Right. I think the nice thing about matzo ball soup is that it really doesn't vary very much from region to region. It's just simple. Everyone knows what it is.
So when I was looking at the recipe, and even the instructions, like, it was extremely simple. It was separate the eggs. It was boil the chicken, make the broth, but then it was, separate the eggs, put your soup mix, essentially your parsley and all that, into the boiling water, make the soup, and then just throw the dumplings in. Make the dumplings, super quick. It was
Which
easy.
Which is really easy to do.
It was just use the egg whites and the I forgot the rest of the recipe, but the ground chicken and whatever, and then just kind of clump it together and throw it in there. And I was like, wow, it was essentially kind of like, I mean, it's, I guess, just like regular dumplings. Okay, so we've had our matzo ball soup, and it is very tasty. Like I said, it is like chicken noodle soup. But let's get into the story here now, where we are talking about the Jewish Avengers, or the Nakam. I'm sure there's a slur in there.
Yes, because it is Hebrew.
Completely no offense to the Jewish people. I don't know.
It's
Jewish,
Hebrew.
I guess. Hebrew, thank you. Yeah, I couldn't think of the name. I was like, I know there's a name. It's not Jewish. It's Hebrew.
Yeah.
So the Jewish Avengers, or the Nacham, was a group of Jewish resistance fighters who banded together after the end of World War II in an effort to seek retribution against the Nazis who had committed atrocities against their people. Understandably, their mission was to track down and kill former SS officers and Nazi officials who had evaded justice.
The group was founded by Abba Kovner, a Jewish resistance fighter who had fought against the Nazis in the Vilna ghetto. After the war, Kovner traveled to Palestine, where he began to organize the Nacham. The group was made up of former partisans, soldiers, and concentration camp survivors who had all suffered at the hands of the Nazis.
The Jewish Avengers attempted to carry out a number of targeted killings in Europe in the years following the war. Their most famous operation was the poisoning of bread at a prisoner of war camp in April of 1946. The bread was for German POWs at Lankwasser internment camp, which the Jewish Avengers had laced with arsenic. They hoped that it would kill over 2,000 German soldiers there, but only ended up making them terribly sick. No deaths were recorded during this attempt.
The Nacham believed that they were justified in their actions, as they saw themselves as victims seeking justice against their oppressors. Kovner, who was known for his eloquence and passionately hypnotic way of putting their pain into words, was quoted as saying, "The act should be shocking. The Germans should know that after Auschwitz, there can be no return to normality." The group felt that the Nazi war criminals had not been adequately punished for their crimes, and that it was their duty to take matters into their own hands. If they didn't, another Holocaust-level genocide would surely be waiting around the corner. Personally for me, because when I was doing some of the research and I was looking into what he was talking about, the act should be shocking, I was sitting there thinking, from my perspective, if I had gone through that and I had lost everyone I love, my mom, my brothers, my husband,
right,
my kid, would I be as vindictive? Personally, I've done enough introspective work to know I probably would.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I wouldn't be crazy mad.
I absolutely wouldn't go Punisher on him for sure.
Right?
And then that brings up, another point here. I don't know. Have you ever been to the Smithsonian?
No, I really want to.
So when I was in the Navy, this was back in, I was in Ocean at the time and we drove out there. Had to have been 2008 because it was right after high school boot camp.
Mm-hmm.
In 2008, I got the opportunity. I was stationed in Virginia Beach, in Oceana, and we drove up there to DC, to the Smithsonian. And at the Smithsonian, they have the Holocaust Museum.
Mm-hmm.
And we went in there, and it's pretty hard to not cry in there. I mean,
right,
you see all the atrocities and everything that was done. So if you ever get the chance to go, I highly recommend it. It's a good museum to go see.
I was planning on it.
Anything in the Smithsonian, is simply amazing. But
right,
I was a little upset I did not have time to go and see this Air and Space Museum.
I know. I'd love to go see that.
But we made it. We made it to the Holocaust and the large aquarium that they have there, and
mm-hmm.
and we saw the dinosaurs and stuff like that. And I think after that we ran out of time. But just that, that took us. That was all day.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. We went and saw the what is it? The Washington Monument, and we saw the Statue of Lincoln. Because it's all right there in a row.
Right.
But it was really cool. Yeah.
What I keep thinking about when I was going through this, my grandfather fought in World War II. He was over in Italy and all over Europe, but he was in Italy quite a bit. And he said at one point, him and his group were following the railroad tracks out in the middle of nowhere, and they came upon a bunch of boxcars. And they were sitting there thinking, well, that's kind of weird. Why is a bunch of boxcars out here? Then they started hearing voices. Then the Nazis had rounded up a bunch of people of all ages, stuffed them as tightly as they possibly could so like no one could sit or fall, and just left them out there. I mean, there were people who were standing next to someone they loved who was dead and couldn't fall to the ground.
Yep.
So they, of course, my grandfather was always a very proactive individual. So he was like, do not give them food. Do not give them water. And I remember being little when he was telling me this. And I was like, why wouldn't you do that? Because they've been out there for days. If they had tried to give them anything, these people would have, they would have lost their cookies.
Anyways.
Yes. So they called it in and said, this is what's going on. This is their location. You have to come and take care of them. Yeah. And they did. But Grandpa and his group had to keep on going. Yeah.
It's horrible for them, but it's cool that, that he was able to, hopefully save as many as they could.
Yes.
So if you, like I said, if you ever get the opportunity, it's a great place. They have, stories, about several of the people that were there, and of course, all the gas chambers and, the story of, of everything. And it's a great museum about it. All right, so back to the story here. So the Jewish Avengers' actions were not universally supported. Some Jewish leaders and politicians felt that their actions were a form of vigilantism and could harm the image of the Jewish people in the eyes of the world. The Israeli government eventually disbanded the group and outlawed their activities, though some of them did return to Germany with the intention of continuing the mission, while others stayed in the Holy Land to try and move on.
The story is a complex one, and opinions are divided around the world on their actions. Some see them as heroes who took a stand against injustice, while others view them as an unsanctioned force out for vengeance, taking the law into their own hands. Regardless of one's opinion, as we've clearly stated our own, their story highlights the deep trauma and pain suffered by Holocaust survivors and the lengths to which they would go to seek justice.
Yeah, and like I was saying, I think they would be rightfully.
I agree. The only problem I have was they were sitting there thinking, I read it at one point, I didn't put in here. Well, I am now. Their whole plan was, so you guys killed, what was it, 8 million?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that of our people. Indiscriminately, we're going to kill 8 million of yours.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I would fully agree with that. I'm not going to go and kill an innocent child because their parent was a dick.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Pardon my language.
No,
but I will take out their parent.
Right. I mean, children don't choose their parents. I mean, that's not fair. That wouldn't be fair to the children, of course.
Right.
I mean, I would never harm a child. We would never harm a child, to begin with. But and I totally agree. And that's what I was getting ready to say. I think that they would be, to a point, justified in what they were doing, but at the same time, you have other morals that should come into play. Two wrongs, don't make a right. Yes, it's horrible what they did to you, but they, the Nazis, they were not just set free and, they were rounded up. They were sent to prisons.
And there were a lot of them who didn't want to do that, but if they didn't, their families would die. Right.
And that was the other thing, they were essentially being held hostage. Now, a lot of them, yes, they absolutely did want to do that. And they did, they were very hurtful people or hateful people. And
yeah. And it should be weighed. That kind of thing should be weighed. It shouldn't necessarily, in my personal opinion, I'm not, condemning them or raising them up either which way, but it needs to be weighed. What this person did, does it deserve that kind of action? Right. I'm very much a punishment should fit the crime kind of thing.
Right, exactly. And, and especially the younger teenagers that were forced to.
Yes. Well, and they were brainwashed so intensely. Right.
They're very susceptible at such a young age. And I mean, anybody can easily be manipulated to a certain perspective. And I remember seeing, I don't remember how long ago it was. It was a YouTube or Facebook, one of those reels or whatever, I think. One of those shorts. Where the professor was talking about the two circles. Have you seen that video where he's talking about there's a blue circle and a red circle? And he tells them, he's like, they are not equal. But you look at them, I mean, they look equal, and so he's like, I want half the class, or I want if you think the red circle is bigger, raise your hand. If you think the blue circle is bigger, raise your hand. And they all, separately, raise their hands or whatever. And he's like, okay, great. Now I'm going to tell you, in fact, that these two circles are equal. So I made you make a decision that one was larger than the other.
Based on color, right?
Based on color. You avoided your own instincts to look at them and say, no, they are equal. When, in fact, yes, they were. But because he told them that they were not, they immediately believed that they were not. And the lesson there was how easily you could be manipulated like that. Right.
And I remember taking a psychology class in college where she did something similar. And I remember, because it was visual, and I'm naturally an artistic individual, so I can usually pick up on subtleties like that. I was sitting there going, but they are equal. And she's like, no, they're not. I promise you. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So I remember sitting there like trying to figure out which one should I go with.
Right. And the whole reason being is because why were you so easily manipulated? Well, it's because teacher is a person who you see as an authority figure, and you would not expect them to lie to you, but yet she just did, and then
blatantly to my face, and I was like,
multiple times, to prove a point. So it is very easy for.
It's understandable how you could lose your way when you have an authority figure you're supposed to trust telling you lies.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. To better understand the Nakam, we need to explore the historical context in which they operated. The Holocaust was one of the most horrific events in human history, and its effects were felt long after the end of the war. So that's correct to a point. That yes, it absolutely is one of the most horrific events in human history.
And there are people who still don't believe it happened.
I know, it's ridiculous. Just like people, the flat earthers, and like, come on.
Lord.
One of the only other major horrific events in history that I can think of, besides the Holocaust, is when we dropped the atomic bombs.
Well, there was definitely, it was around the same time too, but you remember learning about Genghis Khan, the attack of the Huns? I mean, that was... every generation, every 100 years has its own horrifying thing.
Because history repeats itself.
It does. But have you noticed that in the last couple of millennia, we have ramped it up? And I think it has to do with the new technology and more modernization. I think it's just the progression.
That's why there's that saying, like, there will be a World War III, there will not be a World War IV. Because at World War III, it will involve nuclear warheads and stuff, and we most likely will wipe ourselves out.
Right.
For the most part. So, I mean, if there's any survivors, I mean, they'd be hard-pressed to, it would be several thousand years, most likely, if not longer, for them to come back to where we're at now.
Right, yeah. If it's the world's still habitable.
Well, that too, yeah. Like how much, you'd be forced to go. Well, they'd be forced to go underground for the most part.
Right. Mole people.
Yeah, exactly, mole people. From the Time Machine.
The Morlocks. The Morlocks.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, the Morlocks. And
I loved that story so much.
Yeah. But that's it's just things that, like you're saying, we repeat ourselves. History does repeat itself.
Oh.
It's not always the exact same thing, but it does. It's
exactly. Yeah. And one of the things too is the Holocaust and like Hiroshima bombings. The reason why it's so big and I think sticks in our heads was almost 100 years later.
Right.
Is because we had worldwide communication that wouldn't allow us to forget.
Right.
Yes. And we had it in newspapers, on TV shows. Right. I mean, of course, it took them a while. I remember Grandpa telling me about that. When he got back to the States after the war, it took them well into the 50s to finally admit, over here in the U.S. at least, that it had happened.
Right.
They kept going, no, that didn't happen over there. And soldiers were coming back and going, it bloody well did. I saw it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, for sure.
For anyone that's listening and has to hear the weird little dog barking in the background, that's my black pug. Her name is Tofbe Fong, and she can be a brat.
So like I was to say, something like that. I mean, everybody pretty much agreed after that. Hey, nuclear weapons are bad.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, for one, that was the end of the war. You know, we put the end of the war to that because, you know, after they saw that, they were like, oh crap, you know,
what have we done?
We probably shouldn't. Yeah, what have we done? Right? You awoken the sleeping monster, essentially, because that's exactly what happened. We were staying neutral, and then Japan came and bombed us, and we said, nope, that's it.
And it forced them into neutrality. Did you? I mean, I'm sure you know that because you were there. But when I found that out, I was like, really? To be clear,
I was not there during World War II.
No. During the time, I mean, it's your fault. You could have gone.
Right. No, I was stationed in Japan, though. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, it's crazy to think that it after what we did with Hiroshima, we're totally off topic, but Bucky, stop.
That's okay.
After what happened with Hiroshima, they were like, oh, okay, no more. We're done. We're not going to be fighting. We're not going to have
We'll be your friends now.
Yes, everybody's friend.
Because that's exactly what happened shortly after that. And, you know, yeah, there was a neutral, you know, there was a worldwide neutral for a long time. For like 20 years or whatever. And then, of course, the Vietnam and all that happened. So.
Right.
Which was in the 70s, I believe. I don't remember. I'm terrible with my war history.
Ditto.
Which is why we're doing the past, or which is why we're doing this. But yeah, so I mean, you know, and it caused a big, you know, neutrality, and you know, now Japan is one of our biggest allies. So, I hear it's okay.
You what?
I hear it's okay.
You hear?
She's still okay, like nonstop, like rah, 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 chasing.
Well, it's because they're blowing up fireworks out there, and it's relentless. And each day, as we get closer to the 4th, they blow up more, and they do it like longer and longer.
Yeah.
And Bucky's losing his mind. He's over here quivering underneath my chair, and it makes her mad because, you know, pugs, they don't understand that they're tiny. She's going to go out there and whoop someone's backside.
Yeah, like little rat terriers are the same way.
Yes.
And, or chihuahuas, for that matter. I mean, a lot of little dogs. I mean, really. I mean, they don't realize how small they are, and they'll take one anywhere. They don't care.
She's got little tiny nubby teeth that really don't do much damage, but still, she's going to whoop someone. Oh my gosh. So,
anyways.
Yeah. This all began in 1933 when Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party came into power in Germany, promising restoration after the First World War. They implemented a policy of anti-Semitism and gradually stripped Jews of their rights, their property, and their dignity. In 1941, the Nazis began the Final Solution, a plan to systematically exterminate the Jews of Europe.
The legacy of the Jewish Avengers is still felt today. Their actions have been the subject of books, movies, and documentaries, and their story has become part of Jewish folklore. The Jewish Avengers serve as a reminder that the atrocity of the Holocaust should never be forgotten and that justice should always be sought for those who have been wronged. Their actions have been the subject of books, movies, and documentaries, and their story has become part of Jewish folklore. Their story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of intolerance, hatred, and the abuse of power.
Thanks for listening to Smarticus Tells History. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and review and make sure to subscribe. And be sure to follow the show at facebook.com/Smarticus Tells History. Or just click the link in the show description. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.